Hey guys, what's going on? I had the taste for some classic sci-fi, so that's what I read, starting with The Stars My Destination by Alfred, which comes highly recommended by a lot of you guys. I was surprised to find that it is a high-flying, action-packed, fast-paced adventure story. When you hear this book talked about, it's often considered a masterpiece. It uses the word on the front of this book, it uses the word on the back of this book. And it's not my idea of a masterpiece. I don't generally consider action stories to be masterpieces. I think they need to have a little more philosophical depth, a little more emotional depth. But of course, the word masterpiece is entirely subjective and up to you. But for me, I was surprised. Not that I was let down. I think this book was amazing, especially consider the time it was written in. A lot of books from the 50s, well, a lot of old sci-fi from the 50s. It's kind of slow, kind of clunky, kind of boring, admittedly, but this was none of those things. It's set in a world where teleportation was just invented or discovered. They figured out how a person can think their way to teleport somewhere else, which I'm just putting this together, but that would lead the way for a very fast-paced story. And the beginning is kind of an overview about how that specific invention shapes the world, as you might imagine it would, socially, economically. And then we're introduced to our main character, Gullyfoyle, who is marooned on a spacecraft and betrayed. So it is a revenge story, and you know I love the Count of Monte Cristo, so already off on the right start. It follows what I imagine to be a lot of revenge stories, where the idea is you gotta be careful of becoming the thing you are out to destroy. And in this, Gullyfoyle definitely does. That is kind of the philosophical, emotional undertone of the story, is him becoming a monster. Perhaps he's already a monster at the beginning of this story, but I know he's not supposed to be a sympathetic main character. I know you're not supposed to like him, but he was extremely unlikable. The things that he did, the things that he said to people, just completely uncalled for, even though he was wronged at the beginning of this book. I don't think I ever warmed up to him. I think that aspect of the book definitely hurt my engagement in it. But like I said before, the pacing was so fast and the ideas were so rapid fire that I was fine just going along for the ride to see what happened to Gullyfoyle and his unfortunately named sidekick, Jizz. There's a government conspiracy, there's weapons of mass destruction, there's definitely some Cold War era paranoia of nuclear fallout and global annihilation. A lot of good stuff there. It did get me wondering about what books from my era are going to be considered masterpieces. And again, it's totally subjective, so to each their own, but The Martian. An amazing book, I think. A book that got a lot of people into science fiction, which is maybe has some similarities to The Stars My Destination, but is it a masterpiece? I don't think so. Will it be considered a masterpiece in 50 years? If The Stars My Destination is a masterpiece, is The Martian a masterpiece? That's the question that's been going around in my head, and I'm not sure. Books I consider to be masterpieces, The Left Hand of Darkness, The Canticle for Leibowitz, Children of Time, maybe? There's a modern one that I think had a lot of new ideas to it. It was a new approach to science fiction, I think. In the comments, what's a modern masterpiece? What do you think is a book written in the last 20 years that's going to be considered a masterpiece in the next 50 years? I'm curious about what you guys think. All right, next up we got Thorns by Robert Silverberg. This guy truly never misses. I guess I've only read 3 of his books so far, but I can imagine all of them are at least good. Thorns is no exception. It's set in one of those futures where there's like a pleasure planet on one of the moons of Jupiter or something. One of those where very far in the future, very entertainment obsessed. And we're introduced to this celebrity socialite TV executive energy vampire at the beginning. And that's what I love about classic science fiction, is that it doesn't hold your hand. You're confused at the beginning. You're just thrown into this abstract scene and you're not supposed to know what's going on. You're supposed to be able to pull certain aspects out of each paragraph and then eventually figure out where you are and what's going on. And I feel like that's something that modern writers have kind of gotten away from, because when a reader is confused, when a reader doesn't know what's going on, I think they put that on themselves, like they should know what's going on. But in a lot of cases, especially at the beginning of a book, you just have to trust your comprehension that you are obtaining all the information available to you, and eventually you will know what's going on. That's part of the fun, I think, in reading a story, in starting a story. So our main character is this energy vampire. I don't know if he's the main character, he's the villain actually. And you see him constructing this futuristic dating show, kind of. He finds these two people, both of which in unfortunate circumstances, a woman who scientists used all of her eggs to produce children that she was never able to see, and who is now very dejected and depressed, and a man who crash landed on an alien planet and was used as an experiment by the aliens. They inverted his knees, they did all of these things just because they could, just because they wanted to see what it would be like. He gets these two people who are in these unfortunate circumstances in life, and he puts them together and gives them an all-expenses-paid trip to, like I said, the pleasure moon of Pluto and the ice scapes of Titan, that kind of thing. But he, of course, doesn't do this with good intentions. He claims to have good intentions, to try and spark love in the universe, but he knows that these people will not work out, and he wants to feed off of their discomfort as it's being televised to, the known universe. And as Silverberg always does, this is very well paced, this is very entertaining. He uses his background in erotic writing very well. And I'm not sure I've read a book like this where I had to know what happened to these characters. I couldn't put it down. I felt so connected to these two characters, and I had to know that they were gonna be okay. So I got to a point near the end where I'm like, Bobby, please put me down gently. Bobby, please don't hurt these characters anymore. And I won't spoil it, but he doesn't break any hearts here. And it's interesting, in one of my last videos I talk about Vonnegut, and in Sirens of Titan, where he talks about how it's good to be used. And I kept hearing myself say that in this book about these characters who were used and abused, and then used and abused again, and Vonnegut's there like, oh yeah, that's good, that's what it's like to live, that's what life's all about. And you have to go a step further into the critique of pure reason, where he makes the difference between being used and being used as a means to something, which gets kind of convoluted, but obviously there's exceptions there to how it's good to be used, because these people didn't have a good time, obviously. So after reading this book, I went through my own life and I was trying to figure out if I was being an energy vampire in any way, if I was gaining satisfaction from someone else's discomfort. And the scan came back mostly clean, but I have to admit to one thing, and maybe some of the other husbands and boyfriends watching this can relate, but I was sucked into Netflix's latest dating show, Love is Blind. Kind of the train wreck effect where you can't look away. And if you don't know what that is, they get a lot of singles and they put them together and they match blindly, and then drama ensues, which is the whole point. And it has these two hosts, which are, of course, the modern-day energy vampires, who kind of fan the flames and fuel the drama. And just a few days ago, they had their final episode where everyone gets together and tensions rise. And that's where I realized it was just Jerry Springer. It was straight up Jerry Springer with a higher wardrobe budget and a higher makeup budget. Everyone had fancy dresses on. They were sipping from golden glasses. And you're meant to think that it's not Jerry Springer, but that's what it is. And Jerry Springer is, of course, the arch energy vampire. He's the one that spawned so many of the other ones. I know he had this guise of helping people out and can't we all just get along? But come on, you can see what he was doing. He was putting these poor people on stage for everyone to ogle and for everyone to suck the energy out of. And sure, in exchange for fame and money, but we all know that's not a good exchange. So thank you, Robert Silverberg, for showing me that and for helping me see it from a third perspective. Although you can go a step further there, because Robert Silverberg creates these characters who are in these unfortunate circumstances and then uses them to entertain us. So we are being entertained by the pain of another human being, although they're fictional. So that's different, right? Everyone here on BookTube has to agree with me, right? It's different. I did have a DNF, Space Lords by Cordwainer Smith. I read a short story by this guy a while ago and I liked it, so I picked this one up, but it was dedicated to one of his servants, and I think he calls him a servant, in the introduction. And I can't help but look at things through a modern lens, and through a modern lens, it was in really bad taste and kind of just left me feeling icky. But I continued reading after that, and then it gives an introduction, kind of like a Harlan Ellison, oh, I was on the sands of Australia writing this book, dear reader, and the skies were blue and life was good, and I hope yours is too, and I hope you enjoy this tale that I've spun for you. It's just like, I don't like that kind of thing. Not sure why, but that's why Harlan Ellison has always rubbed me the wrong way. That was strike two. I kept going, even though by that point the story was already soiled and I already had a lot of preconceived notions that were going to make me probably not enjoy this book, but I kept going anyways. And then it was a book of short stories, I found out, and I was not in the mood for that. So, gonna pass on that one. That's gonna go to the eBay store, although it's not in the best shape. And if I couldn't deal with Space Lords, I thought maybe I could deal with a Starlord by Louise Lawrence. And if you are not familiar with this book, it's not surprising. It's got like 5 total reviews on Goodreads. It was a total random pick from my classic sci-fi pile. It is E.T. It is the Iron Giant. It is that storyline of a crashed UFO and the inhabitant running from the government and being housed by a local family who loves and cares for it. That's pretty much like 90% spoilers for this book. I think it would be classified as YA if it were written today. It was very easy breezy. It was nothing fancy, but I was absorbed by it. It was kind of like watching a TV sitcom or something where you know where it's gonna go. And I don't generally like that idea of reading something or watching something that's just gonna take you down some pre-drilled hole. Like your brain has already experienced all these things before, so it's just water continuing to go down the path of least resistance, which I guess is how I look at YA, admittedly. But yeah, I see the appeal. I wanted something easy. I wanted something that was just relaxing, that just could kind of melt into, and this did that for me. It was nothing special. It was straight 6 out of 10 material. It would be a stretch for me to say that this book has any amount of philosophical depth, but if I read into it a little bit, it's talking about dealing with things when they don't go your way, which I think would be a good message for kids. And at the end, although I don't think it was earned, it does talk about rationality, the downside of rationality, and the room that you have to leave in your brain to allow for the unexplained. Because I don't think any one person is going to have the plasticity of perspective to be able to see everything that goes on in everyone else's life and mind, which is always a welcome message from me. Surprising to find that at the end of the story, because it really wasn't connected to anything else. But if you want something that requires, you know, like half an ounce of thought, pick up Starlord by Louise Lawrence, and that is definitely the first time that's ever been said on YouTube. So there's that. And that's what I got for you today. Definitely in the mood for something a little deeper after that one. So next video, I think I'm gonna read some Don DeLillo maybe for the first time. See how that goes. As always, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.